pick up this session with Nithya Ramaswamy introducing the topic, Is Kindness the New Leadership Superpower, with Clare Beumont.
Nations, elders as well. And really those values and leadership which is grounded in care, in reciprocity and deep listening. So, I think we're going to talk more about this, but the leadership piece itself begins in relationships with people, with story, and of course with country. So is kindness a weakness, or is it a powerful act of courage and connection? I think that's really what we're going to talk about and explore. Before we get into that, a bit of introductions from us as a team, who we are. So we've got a few of us on the call who sort of set up the community of practice, the leadership experiment. So we've got, of course, Claire, Richard, Dale, Michael, Sana, and Christine, all of us as part of this community who are really just curious about leadership in all its forms. And this space is really for us to reflect and explore. It's not a talk to. We just want to be able to test our ideas, share our stories, and really learn from each other. So none of us really comes here as the expert. We're all here as explorers. We want to be able to discover what leadership can look like in sort of this ever-changing world, and as Claire described, quite an annoying tech angle to that as well. So before we also dive in, let's make this session as interactive as possible. Feel free to pop your thoughts in, your reflections, questions in the chat as we go. Of course, if something resonates, feel free to sort of give us a thumbs up or a reaction. And we'll be keeping an eye on the chat as we get into it as well. In terms of Claire, I'd like to, introduce Claire, not just as a fellow practitioner in leadership and organizational psychology, but she was also my dear friend and previous colleague at Korn Ferry. So Claire has an economics and science degree along with a master's in organizational psychology. In her early career, she worked in the treatment of eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia nervosa, and led a national research study through the University of New South Wales investigating alcohol and drug use in Australian workplaces. Her deep interest in people is combined with a fascination of how people work together in teams, and she's really spent majority of her career consulting to organizations on all aspects of people leadership, and has quite a global portfolio working in Australia, Southeast Asia, the UK, for large global consultancies, and running a number of boutique consultancies in Australia and Singapore as well. So as I said, I met Claire a few years ago when we were working in Korn Ferry as part of the leadership consulting practice. We worked together on a number of projects, and Sana, you were one of our clients as well. And lots of fun stories, interesting ones that we can share, and lots of things that I've learned from Claire over the years as well. So today, Claire runs a small boutique HR consultancy out of the Northern Beaches in Sydney. She also works with Harvard Business School and UTS as adjunct faculty, and she supports a number of projects with different large consultancies. She also does a lot of other things besides work. She's got her own client projects, but she's also got, stuff around the house, and her hobbies and swimming and running and life saving and all of that stuff, all of that interesting stuff. So without further ado, please welcome me in joining Claire today in our dialogue on kindness in leadership.
Thank you so much, Nithya, and lovely to be hosting this conversation today. It's a really important topic for me because leading through your values is something we've talked about quite a lot through previous conversations. Sana articulated it in human-centered leadership in the dialogue we had around that. Nithya articulated it in authentic leadership. And for me to be an authentic leader, kindness plays a really critical role in that. So I wanted to start by asking some questions of our audience today. And as I'm doing this, I'm again experiencing some technology challenges. So just forgive me whilst I just try and get this deck up. But I wanted to start by asking some questions today. So first of all, have you had a kind leader? And what does kind leadership look like, and what is the impact of kind leadership? So I'd love people to just start shouting out, give me some ideas around it. Anyone want to nominate that they've had a kind leader? I find that quite telling. Okay, Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, my first career was military, and it sounds upside down, but my last job was over in UK in a NATO job, and I worked for an admiral who was very powerful, a British admiral, but he was a kind man, and for me, kind was he really had a deep concern for how all his people were, as well as a deep concern for what we're doing. And he'd be very honest, but empathic at the same time. So there were a couple of things playing out. He held a really strategic view of what we're trying to do, but he really looked at his people and understood his people and was very empathic and could give very clear and honest feedback within those two broad ideas. So for me, he stuck out as kind, and I remember him very, very fondly as a result of that.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Eloise, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to keep the conversation going, but love to hear your perspective here.
Yeah, I had a great kind leader in corporate world, and it kind of spoils you for any leader that comes afterwards, would be my experience. The great thing about it is it's not, it doesn't mean that they didn't hold you to account or stretch you or any of those things, but when the things went wrong, they were handled with kindness.
Yeah, nice.
And human-centered.
Yep, nice. And that's really the kind of leadership we're talking about. What Michael and Eloise have just described, that's kind leadership in action. The thing that I find really interesting about this topic of kindness in leadership is that despite us kind of intellectually thinking, yep, that seems like a good thing to do, it doesn't happen nearly as much as it should happen. And our global arena is littered with leaders who are not necessarily known for their kindness or for their compassion. And yet, at the same time, some of these leaders do achieve some pretty good things. And, you know, if you think about what has happened recently, very recently in the last couple of weeks, here is a global leader who I wouldn't say is a kind person, who has achieved something that no one else has been able to achieve. And that's really muddy water for me when I think about kindness. And that's got me deeply, deeply curious. Michael Curtin's epistemic curiosity. I want to know more about this. So the conversation today, or the dialogue today, is as much as me sharing what I've researched, as me asking questions of this group. And I've got so many questions to ask of this group. So I really do want us to have a real dialogue about this. I'm using this, I'm playing with this idea for a book I'm writing. And so I'm really keen to get people's perspectives out on the table here. So let's just do a quick skate through. What's happened to my slides? Are they showing up properly?
No, they're not.
They weren't. No, show the teams. So, okay, let's see.
There we
go.
go.
So let's do a quick skate through of kindness in leadership and what people have said about it, really quickly to just frame us up. So if we go back as far as 3 BC, the Buddhist philosophy from Southeast Asia talks to the 10 royal virtues, the Dasaraja Dharma, and they prescribe things like generosity, gentleness, non-anger, non-violence for rulers. If we go back to Greco-Roman times, 4th century, Aristotle, he elevated gentleness, praeotes, as a civic virtue, and he said that proper constitutions serve the common advantage, not the ruler's appetite. Nero, interesting, not someone that you typically associate with strong leadership because he was a bit of a tyrant, but he said that mercy is the distinctive virtue of a good prince. We go to Christianity. Gregory the Great's pastoral rule tells bishops to balance firmness with compassion. Michael talked about that with his leader, and that was called at the time the shepherd model of leadership. You go to Islam, you go to Islamic sources, the Prophet explicitly taught gentleness as being something that is divinely loved. And that formed a theological basis for compassionate authority. Even Confucius talked about the concept of kindness in leadership. He talked about this concept called Ren, benevolence or humaneness, and he said that was the highest virtue that leaders should be ruling by. And he said leaders should lead by moral example and prioritise the well-being of their people. So we've known about the importance of kindness in leadership for a long time. If we come closer to home, and I'm not sure if Michaela Wheeler is on this call. If she is, I want to give a shout out to her. She's helps me with my decks. I asked her to find some beautiful art that suited the culture that I was talking to. And she found the art and also put these beautiful descriptions of the artwork on the slides as well. But if we go closer to home, if we look at kind of what some of our Indigenous leaders would say about kindness in leadership, the Maori concept of mana kitanga, Jocelyn, help me out here.
Manakitanga.
Manakitanga, thank you so much. It's a foundational principle that talks to hospitality, care and kindness. And that's all about showing respect, generosity and care to others and ensuring that others in your community are looked after. So in leadership terms, if you think about Jocelyn,
Manakitanga.
In leadership terms, that encourages leaders to nurture the people around them and to uplift the mana or the dignity of others. And if you think about modern leaders, Jacinta Ardern is really kind of the epitome of this type of leadership. And she actually talks quite freely about her leadership being influenced by this philosophy or this principle. And she says that actually it's one of her strengths, or one of the strengths of that leadership style, is that making people feel valued and welcome where no one is left out is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And so again, if we apply this to kind of other leadership frameworks, it's very much talking to the servant leadership role of putting the tribe before self or others. If we go to African tribes, I come from South Africa, so that's a little bit of my background. People often reference the concept of Ubuntu, which is loosely translated as I am because we are. And it's a philosophy that stresses our shared humanity and our interconnectedness. And it implies very much that a person's well-being is tied into the well-being of their community. Archbishop Desmond Tutu described it as the essence of being human, when we think of ourselves not as isolated individuals, but through our relationships. And in leadership, Ubuntu inspires a compassionate, people-centric approach. And a leader guided by Ubuntu is someone who really emphasises teamwork, community activity, mutual care. Nelson Mandela is often cited as someone who showed a lot of Ubuntu. And the other thing to Nelson Mandela, which also is that deeper level of Ubuntu, is that he talks quite a lot about reconciliation and understanding others who have wronged you. So that's a deeper level of understanding of Ubuntu. So again, we're coming back to these key constructs of kindness in leadership being about kind of care, compassion, concern for well-being. But there is that backbone, there is that kind of obligation, moral compass that's guiding it in all of these philosophies about leadership. Really close to home, if you look at our First Nations, our Aboriginal elders, and this is a beautiful, beautiful painting. It's called Showered in Kindness. And it's talking to this principle of kind of really showering people in kindness. I think it's absolutely beautiful. But if you look at our Indigenous cultures in Australia, there is so much that talks to this concept of kindness in leadership. So a couple of concepts that have really caught my attention are Dadiri, which is quite attentive listening that creates respect, healing and wise action. And they say, let's be clear here, it's not passive, it's the discipline of hearing people and country before deciding. And so what this looks like in the workplace is discussion, right? It looks like non-interrupted rounds of discussion, and it looks like slower front-end sensing so execution can happen faster. And Optus does this, I think, in some respects really well. They talk a lot about whale up front to avoid snail at the end, which is, I think, a really nice way of thinking of that. Connectedness, Kanyini, is another concept that's really struck me, which is unconditional love with responsibility for people, lands, laws, and story. And I love the concept of narrative there. And kind of the concept here is that kind leadership is accountable care. I think that's a really nice way of describing it. You don't just feel for the people who you are leading, you carry obligations to act for their well-being and to act for the integrity of the whole. And again, you've got some really lovely principles you can take into team leadership. Another one that's really caught my eye is this concept of Yindi Yaramara, which people often say is respect, but actually is a bit deeper. It means being gentle, considerate, and going slowly. Kevin Cashman, alive and well, the pause principle. It's about sense making before deciding. And the other thing about Yindamari, which I think is super interesting, they really emphasize early sense making and pacing to avoid social damage and fear. And then the other concept that caught my eye was Mabu Lian, state of collective and personal well-being grounded in connection to country, culture, and other. And so leadership is judged by whether the leader strengthens the lian of the culture that he or she leads. So I think all of that stuff is really interesting. I'm going to pause for thought here because I could talk about this for hours. What's going through people's minds as we talk about this?
Claire, as a newbie to this discussion, sorry, I've just broken the rules. I never put my hand up. My apologies.
It's good to be polite, but you don't need to be Jocelyn. Thanks. I put Jocelyn on the spot there with those pronunciations. She's used to doing it with me, though.
So this is something that in my previous role, I talked a lot about because, and I think it's really important that we distinguish what we mean by kindness because in the previous role where I was working internally, I was often talking to people about niceness versus kindness. And so because there was a culture of niceness and I said, well, what we need is a culture of kindness. And they really struggled with that. And so I had to spend a lot of time talking about how kindness is different, how it's stronger. It's about having the right intention, but it is, about standing up, saying what needs to be said, but doing it with care and love and grace and compassion, all of those beautiful things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a bit later on, but 100%. Being kind is not being nice. Kim Scott tells us that, doesn't she? Radical candor.
Yeah.
But you need to educate people about that. Nick, I'm going to go to you next. I know, Michael, you were next in queue, but I'd love to hear what Nick has to say here.
Oh, I'm like Joss. I'm new to this group as well. But
welcome to the dialogue.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Really similar to what Jocelyn was saying, kind of as you were going through those examples, Claire, I really loved hearing around those because I feel like I have been having these conversations with people lately and this world stage that we're seeing where we are seeing anything but kindness. But I kept coming back to the Brene Brown, clear is kind, like this sense of there are boundaries that come with kindness. There is a strength in kindness. It isn't just people pleasing. It isn't telling people what they want to hear. And so I was reflecting on it. I was having a conversation with a friend this morning, just texting on it. And we were saying we're both LSI accredited. And I did my LSI accreditation kind of over 10 years ago. And at that point in time, even human synergistics themselves were pointing to data, which is, as much as they, encourage the constructive styles, the blue styles, the humanistic encouraging, the achieving, the self-actualizing kind of styles, they also said that you can equally have as much success using the aggressive defensive styles, which are oppositional, which are power, which are competitive. And I feel like as much as people who work in these types of fields and kind of align to this kind of messaging, try and do those more constructive styles, more and more we are seeing so many examples of people winning, being successful when they're using those other styles. And it's a point of conflict for me in my own kind of
100%.
how to reconcile that.
100%. That's exactly what we're going to go to next. And let me share some of the science behind all of this. It's so fascinating. Brendan, I'm going to quickly go to you and then I want to go to my next point. And hello, Brendan. I haven't met you as yet. Lovely to have you on the call. And I love your screen background, by the way.
That's the marketing 101.
Oh, it's nice. I'm a simple person.
Thanks for inviting me along. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, look, I just thought I'd throw the point out there that you know, we talk about some of the leaders in the world and some of the decisions and whether they are actually, you know, defined as kind or not. But I think the kindness element is contextual, right? So if you think back to, I think of like Winston Churchill, for example. We think back to those times. I think the context of that situation demanded a certain type of leader. So, you know, Winston Churchill bringing in, you know, at the end of World War II, World War II, I think it was, yes. And also obviously poverty and those type of things that were happening within the UK. You know, the definition of the United Kingdom people and what kindness would be might just be, you know, him ending a war, for example.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I mean, I think that, you know, this is what makes it all so interesting, leadership, right? Leadership only happens in the context in which it's operating in. And one of the things, not for this conversation, we just don't have time, but just if anyone's got views on this, I want to know, is kindness even like a binary thing? Is it either you're kind or you're not? Or is it like growth mindset? You go through various levels of kindness, but that's not for this conversation. What's for this conversation is what I wanted to talk about next. Are my slides showing? Yes.
They are, Claire.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that stuff I shared with you about what our, you know, Indigenous leaders have told us, what religions told us, what philosophies told us about kindness. Everyone, you know, it kind of makes sense that being kind would be the right thing to do. But as has been articulated by Nick and others, you know, we don't actually do kindness in the leadership nearly as much as we should be doing. And, you know, Nick, I think you were talking about something that I wanted to talk about. If you go back even as far back as the 16th century, Machiavelli talked about in The Prince, he talked about this balance of kindness and fear. And he said, you know, whilst being loved and feared is ideal, when the ideal is not possible, fear is a more reliable way to inspire discipline and bonds of love. So interesting, you know, that's been a conundrum around for a while. And we see this type of leadership playing out today all the time. And let's just take a little trip down the tech industry, right? And let's have a look at some of the most successful bastions of leadership in the tech industry. So let's play a game here. Who in the tech industry is known for publicly firing employees, mocking critics, and embracing a hardcore work ethic? Who is that? It's a name we all know.
Elon Musk.
It is indeed Mr. Elon Musk, who says a maniacal sense of urgency is our operating philosophy. Well done, Elon. Who is known for humiliating employees, screaming in meetings, and for his mercurial temperament?
I'll take a guess there. Donald Trump.
No, we're in tech industry. Vicky.
Oh, tech
Donald
industry,
is
sorry.
not
Yeah.
in the tech industry as much as he thinks
Same
he
profile.
is. Same profile.
Oh, you're going Steve Jobs, Christine.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, Steve Jobs, and that's a tricky one. Oh, well, actually, now I've given away everyone.
I did Bezos and getting there somewhere.
Jeff's in there. Steve, in his early years, was known to be a terrible leader. Like, if you think about kindness. Mark, would you mind just popping your hand down? It's distracting me a little bit in the chat. Michael's known to be a terrible leader, and he's turned around and actually is now seen, you know, looking back as a very visionary and charismatic leader, which is kind of what prompts my question is kindness a binary thing, or are you kind of different stages? And Jeff, as you know, my third guest one here, his reputation is to be really demanding, metrics obsessed. If you look at Amazon, it's got incredibly high burnout. It's got really strict quotas, and it's got really high internal competition. And His lovely quote for today is, Amazon is where overachievers go to feel bad about themselves. So yeah, it's, you know, you can joke about this stuff, but actually, when you look at the research around the impact of this, it's really actually quite horrifying. Oh, again, my builds aren't working properly. And apologies, sorry, because of for those of you who weren't on the call at the very beginning, my slides crashed literally 5 minutes before the call started. So this is a previous version, and you can see I don't have all my references completed, so I will update that. But if you think about the impact of that type of leadership, it comes with a very, very significant toll. So a Gallup survey from 2020 found that only 45% of employees feel strongly that their leaders care about their well-being. Only 45% of people say my leader cares about my well-being. Beyond Blue say that nearly half of all Australians reported experiencing burnout last year. The Corporate Mental Health Alliance Australia 2023 survey found that 44% of employees reported some level of burnout in that year. According to Safe Work Australia, mental health conditions in workers' compensation claims accounted for about 9% of all serious workers' comp claims in the period 21 to 22. That was a 37% increase since 2017 to 2018. A survey by the Australian Workers Union found that 50% of Australian workers reported being bullied, harassed, or exposed to conflict or inappropriate work behaviour. And bullying is estimated to cost the Australian economy between $6 billion and $36 billion annually. Another article I've come across recently shows that 34% of employees reported lower mental health levels than 6 years ago. And what's really, really concerning is that Australia and New Zealand have some of the highest stress levels globally at around 47%. And I'm sorry to bring the tone of this conversation or this dialogue down, but this is the impact when we don't have kindness in leadership.
I don't know whether you might have seen the article in the AFR this morning to say unfair work dismissal claims have gone up 30% year on year over the last few years, which reflects these statistics.
Yep, I didn't see that. Eloise, you wanted to say something. Hey, Christo, I know you've just joined. You've been having trouble. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm a bit late, but I've been on for a while.
So Claire, you know me, and for the others that don't, please don't take this as a binary position. But in my last role, I had to deal with a number of highly entitled people who were, in my opinion, completely taking the mickey. And I think we had about 25% of the workforce with employee relations, and everything was used from mental health. iCare would just approve any claim. Sometimes people were saying it was sexual harassment when it was just touching them. I'm talking touching an arm, I'm not talking anything else. And so we've got these really different definitions of what is harassment, what is performance management and holding to account, and what is a human kindness, caring factor versus a having it all your own way pace. Yeah. Now, I like to think of myself as a kind person, which is why I started the way I did. But it was really interesting to see some of the entitlement coming through, and I'm wondering if so. And you know how divided our society has got about different things. I'm just wondering if that is reflected in some of these statistics.
I don't know the answer to that.
It's a curious question. Just looking at it from the other perspective. Maybe everything isn't as bad as these numbers would suggest. I'm not saying that it's not. These statistics are awful. I'm not trying to dispute that. Oh, look, but I think it's a chicken and an egg playing out at the same time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is such muddy water, right? So for sure, and and I think I'm still learning, developing my understanding on this. I don't think I'm the only person who's developing my understanding on this, and it's a very complicated topic, right? It's a really interesting, complicated. Benefit of conversations like this is it's a bloody difficult question, and we're trying to work it out. But I think that's a good thing. I'm going to just quickly take two comments from Brendan and Nithya, and then I'm going to move on, if you don't mind, because I just want to get into the neuroscience a little bit, because I think that's quite interesting. So Brett and sorry, I didn't answer your question. I don't know. Brendan.
Yeah. Sorry. Just quickly, Eloise. Yeah. Eloise, to your point, personally, company-wise, we've had some unfair dismissal claims, and both of them that we've actually have been washed out pretty early on, because there's just no basis to any of them. So, experience that I have as managing director, we do see a lot of the entitlement coming through when you actually just have a straightforward conversation with people and tell them something they don't want to hear. Sometimes it's just seen to be unfair by their definition.
I think some of that, sorry, I'm going to just jump in here. I think some of that is because there's a skill gap, right? People don't like having these conversations. They avoid it because they're trying to be nice, and then they do them badly. I think that sometimes is at play as well.
We spend a lot of time trying to set expectations early in the employment piece as well, and we find that sort of helps out. But back to the statistics, some research that we have done previously had found that those statistics particularly spike in the mining industry, where FIFO and those type of roles or rosters are quite common.
Yeah.
And it's generally to do with people away from family environments.
Yeah, they don't have the support networks that they have, which elevates everything. Yeah, it's super interesting. That sounded pushed off. I didn't mean that to be. It is a very interesting topic. Sorry, Nithya.
I'll just be really quick, Claire. But I had a couple of thoughts. I mean, one is that I suppose, and this is sort of a provocation around kindness. I mean, I don't know whether, and does kindness sort of sit by itself as a concept, or does it almost coexist with wisdom? Because kindness without wisdom can be seen as naive. I'm just being so nice. And in leadership, we talk about intent versus impact, right? We've all got the right intentions. And I might be nice to start with, but that might not be the right thing to do. It might be something else. So I wonder whether that sort of, concept or the construct sits alongside others. So that was just a thought. And I wanted to also call out Glenn's comment,
thank you.
In the chat. And I've lost your comment, Glenn, but I thought that was really interesting around the fact that the guys are entrepreneurs, and maybe that necessitated a different kind of leadership at that point in time. So, again, another provocation there, which is great.
Yes. So I love that concept of does it exist with other stuff? Yes, of course it does. I love your provocation around it being wisdom. I'm a kinder leader now than I was as a young leader, for sure. Part of that is because I'm not so defensive, but for sure, I think some of that is wisdom. Your second point, Glenn, to your point around maybe there did need to be those type of leaders. Yes and no. I challenge that a little bit. I don't think you need to be nasty. And you look at other entrepreneurs who don't do it that way. But I don't run a very successful multi-million-dollar tech industry. So what do I know? But yeah, anyway. So let me go back to, did anyone else want to say anything quickly? Let me go back to slides then, because I want to get into some of the neuroscience stuff, which is so interesting. Can you see my slides?
No. Not yet, but I think Vicky's got a hand up, Claire.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'm not going off screen again. It's too
that's
confusing for
okay.
me.
No, I was just going to mention a study that was done at Sydney University recently, a Skills Horizon study that's just come out this week.
That's brilliant.
And trust actually came up as one of the issues in all organisations in all generations. So maybe there's something about the kindness in relationship to the lack of trust in organisations now. So I just want to point that one out. Yeah.
What a good segue into my next section, Vic.
We didn't actually practice that one, did
We
we?
didn't practice that one, but Vicky and I talk about this stuff a lot of the time. So yeah, not surprising you're thinking that same way. Hang on. Oh, can we let Naomi into the meeting as well?
We have.
Someone? Oh, perfect. Thanks. Hey, Naomi. So I wanted to just go into the neuroscience. So what happens when people are operating in unkind environments where they're fearful? So we know that when people are operating out of fear, it can directly undermine their performance. So studies say employees suffering from stress, and particularly change-related stress, perform on average 5% worse than most employees. And in workplaces with change fatigue, nearly 1/3 of employees report being less productive. That drop in productivity costs Australia about $2.3 billion a year. Not only does it impact in change, it impacts in innovation as well. So again, research done 2022 says that 85% of executives say that fear is one of the major things that holds back their company's innovation efforts, and that's from culture, right? Again, if we look at the human toll of this, 60% of employees in low psychologically safe cultures report burnout, compared to only 5% of employees in high safety cultures. So that is the impact of fear in action. And 34% of employees in fear-driven cultures consider quitting their organisation, compared to 3% of those who work in organisations where they feel accepted and included. At a macro level, poor mental health costs up to 4% of GDP globally. And we know that there is a psychological toll around, we know that there is a toll around this quite significantly in terms of psychological safety and people's well-being. So chronic stress and uncertainty spike, burnout spikes, and loss of talent spikes. So it's quite significant, the impact of this. Not just at a macroeconomic level, not just at a corporate level, but at a very deep and personal level, impacting people and their experience and their families' experience. One of the interesting things that also is a byproduct of this is that when people are experiencing mental health issues, there is a massive multiplier effect of that mental health issue on their social networks. So it has a cumulative effect around the people that they spend time with. So it can be a pretty dire situation. So what can we as leaders do about this? To just bring the tone up to a bit of a more positive and happy state to finish off. So I'm curious to think or to ask people, what can we do? I've got some ideas, but curious to hear from other people. Let me prompt your thinking around this. Human sustainability is now seen as being a board critical topic, with 80% of CEOs and board directors reporting that they feel quite pressurised to improve human sustainability in their organisations. So, and you know, the research that kind of draws on that was saying that this concept of kindness being built into the organisational operating system, and being a board accountability as well as an executive accountability. So what do people think? What can we do? If we know kindness is good, if we know that we don't always experience kindness at work, what can we do?
I think
I've depressed everyone into silence. I'm sorry.
no, Claire, I was just reflecting on the fear piece as well, and you know, how do we help people? It took me back to the Keegan and Leahy's immunity to change stuff, and even when people know that they've got dire outcomes from a health perspective, they still can't change some of their habits around chronic sort of issues they've got. So this ability to change our mindset comes in, and how do we connect with our emotions in a way that enables us to take things in and shift our mental model and change, right? And so does that occur? What was in my mind was, does that occur better if we are fearful from an emotional perspective, or whether we can connect with a really positive set of emotions? And it took me back to the person who quoted the University of Sydney study around trust. And probably at the base of that, this ability to build trust so that we can be candid. And that's probably where I'm at. Just kind of bringing all of that together.
Awesome. Love it. It's a great segue to my next section, Dale. And again, we hadn't rehearsed this team, but Christine, you've got something on your mind, and then Ellie, I want to hear what you've got to say.
Hello, everyone. I was just reflecting on your question, Claire, on what can we do. I think we need to talk about it more. I think sessions like this are fabulous, and being curious about kindness and debunking what niceness is and what niceness offers and what niceness lacks, and then what kindness offers, what kindness, how we might grow kindness, and how we might share that with others and role model it with others, I think is where we need to start, because I think perhaps many of us have grown up with a view of what leadership is, or we hear about what some leaders are doing, and we think maybe that's it. And it's about sort of changing our stories around what leadership is and what it can be, is my impression. I also looked at research when I was doing my master's, and there was this term around feminine leadership, which was talked about, which, you know, embodies a lot of kindness and the humanistic, encouraging aspects of the LSI, and everything that you'd see in something like the TLC. And I wondered how, I didn't really want to gender it. So I kind of was quite curious about that concept. But, you know, when we think of kind leaders, it's somehow a lot of the time, you know, Jacinta Ardern comes up. But although when you were talking earlier, you also mentioned some really wonderful men as well. So I think it's important that we don't gender this this term as well. And I just feel so optimistic about, if we can lean into this conversation more and more and share it with others, what a greater world we can create. Because ultimately the world is so divided at the moment, and that we are on the precipice of enormous change with AI and unrest. And it's really love and kindness that's going to get us through our human side of leadership and humanity.
100%. 100%. I agree. And I really like, Christine, the kind of your challenge to us. Let's not gender it. When I was researching this, the person I kept on thinking of as a kind leader was my dad. He didn't lead me. He was the father of my family. But I have to look at how I watched him lead, and he was a very successful man. And so a lot of my examples of kind leadership are actually men. So it's not a gendered thing. Men can be as kind leaders as women can be, and there are some very unkind female leaders. Ellie.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I think when you're asked this question, when we think about, you know, concepts or how can we lead with more kindness, and then we take that to our organisations and we show examples, it's really, what does kindness mean for the person? So everyone shows up in a different way. We've been saying that's a kind leader, that's not a kind leader, but we need to be able to show our leaders, what does it mean for me to be kind, rather than tell them to be kind. Does that make sense?
100%.
So that's one of the things I think needs to change. And what it shows up for one person will be different for kindness for another. The other thing is our sectors. So I've moved from corporate into non-for-profit, you know, and then you've got like military, all the different sectors. Kindness might look different.
Yeah.
However, the overarching principle's the same. So I'm just thinking, is there a different way that we look at it, from sector, from organisation, and then individual? And each of us can create that. We don't have to be told what that looks like. We can self-discover that.
100%. I love that. and again, sorry, that sounded like I was moving you along. I'm not trying to.
You're right.
I do have a few things I want to go through, so I'm going to go through a little bit quickly. Dale set me up super duper well. What can we do to lead with kindness? First of all, we can override our human brain, and let me tell you why I say that. Because our brain is made up of three parts. We've got our neocortex, which is our executive brain, where we do all of our thinking and decision making. We've got our limbic brain, which is our emotional brain, where we do all our memories and our relationship work. And we've got our reptilian brain, or our survival brain, which is made up of the brainstem and the cerebellum. And that's what's sometimes called the reptilian brain. And that controls our basic functions like breathing, heart rate, flight, fight, or freeze response. Now, the problem with the human brain is that our reptilian brain is a super strong muscle, and it kicks in under stress or when we are feeling threatened. So when people are operating in fearful environments where they don't have kind leadership, where they're being bullied, where they're being pulled out by their leader, where they are an overachiever who's being made to feel bad about themselves because of their work culture, they're operating in their reptilian brain. Their reptilian brain is taking over. And when your reptilian brain takes over, your neocortex shuts down and you can't make good decisions. So one of the things we as an individual can do and organisations need to do is we need to rewire our brain. And I'm influenced here by some really interesting work in a book called Survival of the Nicest. And I can't remember the author's name, but I can... it's Stephen Klein's Survival of the Nicest. Really interesting read. He talks about kind of how we need to rewire our brains to operate well with other people and to create the right conditions for other people to thrive, because he says that actually humans are social creatures. But the thing that we're operating with is that from an early age, we are taught, and instinctively our brains tell us to trust and empathise with people who look and act like us. It's our tribe. It's safer to be trusting our tribe. And our amygdala is chemically or physiologically engineered to kick in with this threat response, to be fearful or to be distrustful when we encounter something new or different. So when we encounter someone who thinks differently from us, our brain is engineered to say, warning, 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 danger, 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 this person is dangerous. Without conscious effort, we might actually go into PLUs, working with people like us, or our, the people that we always go to. Corn Ferry has a term for it, which has escaped my mind. Nick, help me out here. The thing I love about this research around neuroscience and kindness in leadership, and it relates to inclusive leadership as well, is that the science would suggest that those leaders who are able to shut off their reptilian brain and actually engage their neocortex in times of difference or stress or newness, they have evolved their brain. They have a more evolved human brain because they're overriding their automatic human responses. And how do you override that? You do it by consciously taking perspectives of other people and by demonstrating intellectual humility, telling your brain that different is not dangerous, it's an opportunity to learn. And again, the research will say, and a nod back to Michael Curtin's first dialogue in this series talking about the superpower of curiosity. The research says that by cultivating curiosity and empathy, leaders can rewire their brains to appreciate others. What happens when people receive kindness? There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in our bodies when we receive kindness. Oxytocin, the trust hormone or the moral molecule, is triggered, and that promotes feelings of connection, empathy, and loyalty. When women breastfeed babies or when you touch someone skin to skin, oxytocin is released. It's that sense that you get of belonging, of loyalty, of empathy. That, if you can turn that on in teams, it makes people more generous. It makes people more cooperative. It makes people willing to engage. Who doesn't want that in their team? Cortisol, when people experience kindness, cortisol, the fight, flight, or freeze hormone reduces, which allows the neocortex to step forward. That gives you a calmer, clearer mental state. That's where creativity kicks in. Dopamine, which for anyone who likes a glass of wine, when you have dopamine, you want more of it. Dopamine kicks in when people are being kind to you. And that, because of the impact of dopamine, people always want more dopamine, people want more of that kindness. So it cultivates this feeling of people wanting kindness at work. And the really interesting thing around the neuroscience of it is your pleasure and your motivation parts of your brain, and I don't know the science well enough to explain this in a scientific way, but your ventral striatum controls both pleasure and motivation. And when that's triggered, your motivation is triggered at the same time as well. So if you are kind to people, you're going to make them more motivated as well. I know that sounds Machiavellian. It's not at all. It's just fascinating to see what happens when people receive kindness. And it's aligned to the Buddhist principle of Nembutsu, which is a principle of giving gratitude. When people give gratitude to other people, the studies show that the person giving the gratitude receives better benefit or even more benefit than the person receiving gratitude. Kindness in leadership is like that. It's a multiplier effect. It promotes people feeling generous with their time, with their attention. It gives people stronger focus. It makes people want to work together more. So there's a lot to be said for why we do want kindness in leadership. We talked about this earlier. Is kindness niceness? No, it is not niceness. Kim Scott articulates this really well in her theories around radical candor. Being a kind leader does not mean you are a soft leader. I like the Harvard Business Review definition. Kindness is repeated intentional acts that promote others' welfare and their work. I paraphrase that a bit. Kindness is not empathy. Empathy is understanding someone else's state. It's necessary to have empathy to be a kind leader. It is not sufficient to have empathy to be a kind leader. Another term that gets thrown around a bit is collegiality. I kind of think, and the Harvard article talks to this as well. And again, sorry, it was referenced, but this is an earlier version, so I don't have my citation up. I will distribute the properly cited deck later on. My file corrupted 5 minutes before we came on board. But collegiality is all about professional goodwill and cooperation. That is surface level. That's superficial. That is not kindness. I like to think of it, and I think it's really nicely articulated, that nice leadership is the avoidance of discomfort. We all know what Patrick Lencioni says about conflict being what does he say? The passionate debate for the truth of an issue or something like that. But niceness or the avoidance of that conflict, that's not great leadership either. So I think the thing to be talking about when we talk about this concept of kindness in leadership, we've got to be really clear about what it is not. It is not these things. What does kindness in leadership do? It creates psychological safety, which means we've got more voices in the room more quickly, we learn quicker, we hide errors less. People have permission for honest input. We have deeper, more entrenched relationships. Kindness can act as a pro-social norm. It's contagious. That's the wonderful thing about kindness. You think about, I don't know if you've ever had the experience walking down the street, someone smiles at you, you smile back at the next person, or someone compliments you, you're more likely to give someone else a compliment. The other interesting thing about kindness that I didn't know is that when people are operating in a kind environment, it reduces cognitive overload. Their body's not in threat response so much. They're not dealing with the stress or the uncertainty around them, and that allows them to make better, sharper decisions as well. What does kindness look like in practice? It looks like giving good feedback. It looks like managing people's workloads appropriately and being transparent about how work is distributed. It looks like checking in with them. It looks like recognition and credit sharing. And goodness me, that does not happen enough in organisations, people giving credit or recognition. And it also looks like blameless postmortems. Hey, we did this, we put in this pitch, it didn't work. Let's just sit down with a really curious mind and really talk openly about what went wrong and what we could do differently. And you can't have those conversations if you don't have a high trust environment, and kindness is a real amplifier for that trust environment. The other thing I wanted to just talk about very quickly is around measuring impact. Basically, you've got lag and lead indicators. I'm not actually going to spend any more time on that. I just clocked my watch. My key takeaways for you. Kindness is relational, not performative. It's a practice of maintaining right relationships with people and place back by duties. It requires humility in practice to move faster and safer. And that's directly coming from that Dadiri construct that I talked to you about earlier. Kindness embeds well-being as a system outcome of leadership. That comes from maybe Lian, another one of those Aboriginal principles of philosophies that I talked about. A really interesting thing, I didn't talk about it, but look it up if you're interested. It's this concept of Ganma, which is sharing power and learning across different groups. That's another Aboriginal construct. And for me, that's an aspect of kind leadership. Adopting deep listening, being human-centred in design or human-centred in work as well are also other elements of or other ways of demonstrating kindness. So I am on the clock, sorry. I am going to close the conversation now by saying I'm sorry we couldn't have more dialogue. As you can see, I could talk about this really for the rest of my life and hope to be. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution and your stretching my thinking on this very worthwhile topic.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everybody.
Can I add a couple of things just before we all take off? Just once again, Claire, sensational session. This is our last leadership dialogue for 2025. We'll kick off in the new year again and pick up on these topics. So if you've enjoyed this is the sixth one that we've undertaken in literally the last 6 months. Watch out for the article that will be generated off the back of this leadership dialogue that'll be out this afternoon. There'll be a podcast that comes out in the next week where we sit down with Claire and discuss the ins and outs. That's always a very interesting kind of in-depth discussion that kind of goes in a variety of different directions. So tune into our podcast. And of course, Santa, make sure I've got the date right. 14th of May is our save the date for our leadership conference that we're going to have. Or unconference. It's going to be pretty exciting. We're all excited about it. So 14th of May, put it in your diary now and look forward to seeing you all in the new year. We'll keep the comms up in the interim anyway, but we don't see you between now and the new year. Have a great break over the summer, and we look forward to re-engaging with our community in 2026.
Awesome. And I'll just quickly say we're going to send out a survey regarding what you guys would like from the conference. We really want to hear your views.
Amazing.
Awesome. Have a great Friday, everybody.
Thanks so much, Claire.
Thanks for joining.
Work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everyone.
For more information on the Leadership Experiment and to join our community, please go to www.theleadershipexperiment.com. Thank you for listening.